Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with Joe from Eye of the Destroyer to talk about the latest EP, The Wolf You Feed. It was just released on October 9th. How's it going?
Honestly, it's going great. It's been a ton of media stuff for me to do, which has been super fucking exciting. I'm enjoying the experience of talking to people because, I mean, obviously this is usually what I get from playing shows, and I haven't been able to do that with COVID-19. So having conversations about music, it has been definitely lacking in my life, so it's like, it's a great experience to be able to talk with a guy like you about fucking music. I don't get to have these opportunities as much as I used to. So, that for me has just been a great experience. And obviously I'm excited about the record. So, talking about that, I can do all day. You know what I'm saying? So it's been great.
The way you said COVID-19 made me think that perhaps we'll see a hardcore band popping up at some time named COVID-19.
I think a lot of people threw that around right in the beginning. You know what I mean? They're like, okay, so when's the COVID-19 band come? You know what I'm saying? And quite frankly, like, you can't knock the hustle. If somebody comes out and they make some money off of that stupid shit, you got to let them go. You know what I mean? Give them
I love that way of thinking. Let me start off by asking you, what was the driving force behind this EP?
The driving force behind this EP, I think, was healing. I really was in a dark place. It was really fucked up the way I was living my life. And it kind of poured out of me, in so many ways. I just wanted to have something that was a direct representation of my personal struggling, and my human experience from this dark kind of outlook that I was living in. I mean, I was very heavy set. I was about 380 pounds. I was drinking a ton. I was doing drugs. It was just not a good time for me. And, I think I really dove deep in this record and really addressed a lot of what was going on with me. And it was kind of my purpose with the record as a whole, was to dive deep and really go after what I felt like was going on up top, and try to get it out creatively. And that's what it was. It really was healing for me.
And how did you approach that from a creative perspective? Did you sit down and have like a thought process on how you wanted to create these tracks, or did they just come to you, and as they were coming to you, you were kind of putting them together?
As I wrote the record, I think when I was writing it, there was a ton of songs that didn't make the record. And the songs that did, to be honest with you, it's kind of funny because I made the first 5 songs that I wrote are the songs that are on the record. And then the other songs that I wrote after it just weren't. So I don't know that I necessarily planned it that way. I don't think I could call myself a genius in that aspect. Like, I knew it was going to happen, but I definitely wrote the 5 songs. And as I wrote those 5 songs, they all flowed out of me in a specific way. And they kind of flowed together. And that was what I really liked about the way that they were arranged. And as far as lyrics were concerned, some of the lyrics I had ahead of time, like for Colder, for Weight of the World, these were songs that I had like, ahead of time and had written just in a dark place. Like, for me, like, when creativity strikes, it could be anywhere. I could be at the gas station, I could be wherever, it doesn't matter. So a lot of the times, like, when stuff comes to me, I just put it in my phone. So, a lot of the stuff was written in the middle of the night, in a fucked up headspace. So that's kind of what happened with that.
How come that one of the things that surprised me when I started listening to the record was the fact that you guys self-released it? What drove that? I mean, like, this is a really quality EP, top to bottom. You would expect, I mean, unless you guys wanted to self-release, but I would expect a label to really say, hey, we can help you guys out.
I think that the thing that happened with this record, in terms of the way we released it and not going through a label, was this record wasn't necessarily supposed to happen. The band had been going through a little bit of turmoil. And I think that's why, like, in the press release, you'll see, like, I thank Dan Kaufman a lot for pushing me through to push this record out, because I had written it, I recorded it, I loved it, I thought it was great. And it just, nothing came of it for a little while, and we were kind of sitting on it. So it turned into this situation where we were just kind of like, you know what, like let's put this out. Let's start putting music out. And I thought that COVID-19, I had lost my grandfather in the beginning of it. And it was like it was a fucked up experience for me. And I started going on to a bit of a weight loss journey, and I started going on to these things and trying to fix myself. And this record was really healing, and I felt like the timing was right. And I kind of just like, I don't know whether I jumped the gun, so to speak, because I probably said, but I just wanted it out there. I just needed to get it out there, and it just needed to be a thing. I couldn't live with it not being out there and people not knowing it existed anymore. So I think that's why it was the way that it was.
When you go back and you listen to the album now, do you travel back to where you were when you wrote those songs? Like, do those tracks now become like almost a roadmap to where you were that exact day when you put those tracks together?
In a lot of ways, yeah, they really do. And I think that that's one of the cool parts about this album, from my perspective, is that like it's kind of nice to be shot back into that feeling and to go back into that emotional, just overwhelming emotional experience that I was having at the time. So it's kind of like it continues the healing process for me, because when I feel myself like, maybe slipping or maybe not, doing the right things, I can kind of listen to this record and go, yeah, but you don't want to be that person again. You know what I mean? This is what you worked so hard to get away from, and it was really just a healing experience mentally, man. My mental health is just so much different after this record. It's insane. I feel like it's the death of an old person, like shedding skin. You know what I mean? It's very much like that. You compared it to pages in a diary in your review, and I thought that was spot the fuck on, because that's really what it is. I mean, the diary's behind me. It's right next to my bed, and that's where a lot of these lyrics are. So I'm glad that it was that easy for you to pick up. I mean, it was a personal experience, and I'm glad that it's coming off that way.
I think it's going to be easy to pick up for everybody because it's very noticeable, not just in the lyrics, but in the music, how raw,
Yeah.
how emotionally driven it is. You feel it in the music, you feel it in the vocals and how they come across. All the elements of this EP have that constant feel that this is not like somebody who just wrote something and put some words together that kind of like worked well together. You sure I'm saying? Like
it was
there's more
very
to
much
it.
an album, and I think that was one of the cool things that you had said too, is that like from start to finish, it did kind of take you on a little bit of a journey, and there's a progression. You start with like a deathcore aspect, and you move into a more hardcore aspect, and you're seeing every bit of what's influenced me my whole life over the course of this record, and how it's all kind of combined to turn into what this record was, and that really is cool. And I'm just like super excited about the fact that, I mean, that was what I wanted. So when you listen to it and that's the experience you're having, and you're seeing the elements that had influenced it, and you're seeing, you're saying like the vocals and the guitar lines, the drums, all of it, it's like, it's just such a great experience. It makes me feel so good that like I was able to really convey that message and really put that out there and make it so that like you could understand what I was going through, and what influences me, like what my influences are. I'm very influenced by metal, obviously very influenced by New York hardcore, and it's great that you were able to pick up on that.
Because of the evolution of the sound, like you mentioned, from the first song to the last song, you still were able to connect the tracks because there's elements from the first song that jump into the second, and then there's elements from the second that jump into the third, and you could see that happening as you progress. How would you define the sound? Because it's impossible to put this EP under one genre.
You know what? I just have to say thank you. Like for a second, let me just thank you for that, because so often I find like people are just, generalize things like, oh, this is deathcore, or this is that. And quite frankly, I used to get aggravated. If I'm honest with you, I used to get mad, like, oh, we're not a deathcore band. I don't care what you call us at this point, as long as you listen to it, because who am I to fucking argue with you and your opinion? Everything is subjective, right? So it's whatever you want to call it. If you want to call us hardcore, call us hardcore. You want to call us death metal, slam, fuck yeah. I mean, I'm into all of it, but as far as what I would call it, I don't know. I guess metallic hardcore, if I had to like really call it something, if you put a gun to my head and said, what the fuck is this? I would say that,
Yeah, it's for me. I always find that when you start putting too many labels on something, it starts to narrow down the creativity and what you can be, what you can produce, and what the outcome is going to be. I just thought it was very interesting because When I got the EP, I was under the impression that I was going to listen to a deathcore band. And then as I started listening, I'm like, okay, I see some deathcore elements there, but this is not deathcore. I mean, there is some deathcore there, like for sure.
Sure.
But there's a lot more than this is not your prototypical deathcore. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I things that is interesting is people have an idea of what deathcore is, right? And deathcore has become a specific thing. It's become, you know, a detuned sound with sometimes melodic vocal, sometimes you have a lot of ambience over a breakdown. This is what these are deathcore trademarks, right? And you know, every band after Suicide Silence kind of had like a specific deathcore sound. But before that, you had hardcore bands with death metal singers that were just doing the low Cannibal Corpse style growl over a hardcore band. And to me, that's what deathcore was. Deathcore was where a hardcore band, like we're a beatdown band playing hardcore with hardcore parts, thrash elements, but we have this low vocal. So that's what deathcore was to me. You know, like a band like Shattered Realm for me was deathcore. You know, and so that's how I came up. So for me, that's how I view deathcore. You know, I don't view it as what everyone sees it as today. And I'm not saying anybody's wrong or right, because like I said, music is music. Whatever you want to call it, you fucking call it. Whatever your heart desires, you know, just listen to it. At the end of the day, just listen to the shit. You could call it whatever you want. But that's what it is for me. Like when you say deathcore, I look at the old bands that I grew up with that had elements of death metal, but were very much rooted in hardcore.
I think now that genre specifically has gone to a way where almost every band that's putting out a record, and I'm not saying this every band, but almost every band has the same sound. It all sounds the same. It's all like just Zagumbo. Like it's really hard to pick and choose some bands that kind of like stick their heads out and have a different sound. I think what you guys did.
One of them is on your shirt for sure.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
as far as you know, Pat and Will are concerned, those guys, those are some top-notch songwriters. I mean, you look around, Will is in everything that's relevant currently. You know, that's a guy I would absolutely love to work with. I came up in the same guys. And their stuff is fantastic, and figured out a way out. Awesome. And but I agree with you that there's a lot of cookie cutter style deathcore bands out there. You know, Lorna Shore is another Jersey band that kind of took the deathcore sound and really built on it. You know, really
I 100% agree with you.
And really added black metal elements and ambient and pushed the BPM and the tempo to as high as it could go. And I mean, really just a fantastic band as well, coming out of Jersey. So I love to put the Jersey bands on, obviously.
No, I agree 100% with you. To me, I've never been a huge deathcore fan, and I can always gravitate towards maybe 4 or 5 bands that to me kind of created their own niche within that genre. So they're within the genre, but they kind of surpassed the genre because they created their own sound. So they're still part of the scene and of the genre, but now they're almost on their own as well at the same time. You mentioned Lorna Shore, Fit for an Autopsy is another band, like obviously on my shirt. And you know, bands like Die Artist Murder, I really like a lot of these bands because they have a little bit of creativity in how they put things together. So going into your EP, I was a little bit concerned because I'm like, if this is the cookie cutter deathcore kind of stuff, man, it just bores the hell out of me. You know what I mean?
I get it.
And then when I started listening to it, I'm like, wow, there's crossover thrash, some thrash, there's hardcore, a lot of hardcore. I grew up listening to Agnostic Front, so I grew up listening to a lot of New York City hardcore bands. And I could see some of those influences in your sound. And I loved how diverse it was. It just had a lot of life, and the evolution from the first to the last track was so clear, so abundant. But I love the fact that when you get to the last song, you still added some deathcore elements from the first track, came back into the last track. I thought that was pure genius. It's almost like you're going full circle.
Thank you, man. Listen, I can't say thank you enough, even just for that analyzation. To me, that means so fucking much to me. I don't even know how to really describe it in words, but I will say this. There was definitely, when I got to that song, that 5th song, Weekend Thoughts, it's about my brother's death. and it was a song that was really deep to me, and I wanted to have, you kind of you hit the nail on the head when you said like a baby between Slayer and Hatebreed.
Yeah, yeah.
Like there's no higher compliment in the world for me than to hear somebody say that. I mean, it did have deathcore elements, and it has like that heavy breakdown at the end that is definitely, it's a very much a deathcore breakdown. And you know, I just these are the things that influence me, and I just don't feel like you have to be one way or the other. I feel like we live in a world that's so one way or the other sometimes, and it's kind of nice to just embrace everything, isn't it? It's kind of nice to just embrace everything. Like you said, there's elements of deathcore that you like, but most of it bores the hell out of you. I feel the same way, but I feel like if you take the good parts of everything and you try to make it your own, then what you've done, then you've done something good creatively. You've created something
100%.
that happens to grab your listener. And I
Yeah.
wanted to appeal to everybody. I did. I'm not
And
gonna
I think at the end of the day, you want for the listener to, like, when they start listening to a song, to know that they're listening to you. So I think
for
that's important, that you create that fingerprint style sound,
yeah.
so that when you start listening, you're not wondering who the band is. Some bands, you can't tell them apart. But when you have bands that you have that ability, that within the first two notes, you're like, ooh, I know who those guys are, because nobody
Right.
else sounds like that.
Well, listen, I mean, that's a high compliment as well, and thank you so fucking much for that, because I agree. I agree. There's so many bands out there where you can hear you can hear the drum part, and you could go, oh, okay, I know what that is. You know what I'm saying? Like, Lombardo's pretty. You can't mistake a Lombardo drum. You can't mistake a Chris Adler drum. You know what I'm saying? Like, those things happen, and you're like, oh shit, I know what this is. And it's important. It's important to have that kind of stamp on what you do, and so people know, like, this is an Eye of the Destroyer song. I definitely wanted that, and I'm glad that came across, because this is very much my style. This is what I do, and you're going to hear more of that. It's not going to stray from being a deathcore, metal, thrash, crossover, hardcore band, if you could call it that. That's what I'm going to do, bro. That's it. That's who I am. And I think that, part of being unique, somebody once said to me, there's so many people out there doing music. So there's a sea of noise. The only thing that you could be is yourself. That's it. That's all you could be. You could be like everybody else, but you're going to sound just like you said, oh, this band sound, you can't tell this band apart from that band. And I'm sure I've done some of that in my career as a musician. But I just, at the point that I'm at right now, I really just wanted to write something that I thought clearly represented me and clearly represented what I wanted to hear, and I really tried to do that with this record.
Was there a song on this EP that was difficult for you to put together for whatever reason, or do you feel like they all kind of work their way
You
into
know
the
what?
paper
I
easy?
think Colder was the hardest song for me to do. And the reason being is because it strayed away so much from what I normally do. To have like this guitar line that started out with Colder, and to do a hip hop vocal, and to commit to pretty much the whole song being hip hop vocals. Like, I pretty much committed to that. I was like, okay, this is a rap chorus on any other song, but I'm gonna somehow, I'm gonna put it together, and I'm really gonna embrace my New York hardcore here. And I'm just gonna make this as raw and street as I can. And that was, I think, difficult for me, to have like a bass only verse where it's just a wide open guitar lick, and there's a lot of breathing going on in that song, where the song is just like, it's open guitars, and there's a lot of bass. It's built on a drum part that's not necessarily very busy, but very big, almost a John Bonham style, where you're playing as big as you can, but you're not really playing a whole lot, you're just owning what you're playing. And it was very vocal centric. So I think that song was difficult only because it was so different from what I had done previously, and it was weird, because when I gave guys the EP, guys I work with, marketing guys or radio guys, they were like, this is the song. And I was like, kind of
That
blown
was
away.
one of my favorites.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But they were like, yeah, this one's the song. And I was like, oh, I don't get it. Was the song maybe I was the most unsure about, And it's awesome that was the song that everybody took to, because it just goes to show you that if you take a step out of your boundaries, or you take a step out of the box, that you could create something potentially that people would like more than what is safe for you to do, you know? And that's really what this record was as a whole. You know, it wasn't about being safe. It was about putting yourself out there as much as possible, you know, and people could have come back and been like, this guy's corny. I hate his vocals. I hate the way that he's open about his mental health, because there's so much stigma about mental health. You know what I mean? And a lot of that could have happened, and it would have all fallen on me, and I was very afraid about it. But Kaufman kept pushing me. You know, I joke about it because he has this such a distinct voice. Okay, this guy, my bass player, and he called me on the phone. He's like, calls me Joe Money, and he said to me, Joe Money, listen, baby, you've got to put this record out. It's too fucking good, dude. We gotta quit playing games. The wolf you feed needs to come out. So, and he sounds just like that. If you ever get a chance to talk to him, you'll understand. You'll laugh your ass off because it's spot on. But he refused to let me not put this out. You know, as much as I said, I don't know, I don't know about it, whatever. He's like, nah, fuck that. You better put this shit out. You're not gonna fuck this up. This is good. You know, people need to hear this. So I can't thank him enough for that. But yeah, that was definitely the hardest song for me, because I felt a little insecure about it at first, if I'm honest, you know?
Well, I got to give a shout out to John Freeman, because the reason we're even chatting here is because of him, because he sent me a message, and he goes, have you checked out the EP yet? And I'm like, no. I was like, I don't know if I'm even going to check it out. You know, like I was like, I don't know, man. Like I got a pile like this high of shit to listen to. I don't know. It's like, dude, this shit is good. I never steer you wrong. That was kind of his words, right? I was like, well, if you're now you're putting me on the spot. Now I really have to check it out.
Apply pressure. There's nothing you can do now. What are you supposed to come? Sorry, John. You know?
Like now I was like, okay, now like he's right though. He doesn't steer me wrong. So I was like, okay, now there's some pressure here. The moment I pressed play, I was like, wow, I'm glad he didn't quit on me. I'm glad he pushed me to listen to it. And I'm really glad for that, because
shout out to John Freeman and Freeman Promotions. I mean, those guys. Listen, those guys have done a lot for us, man. And you know, I think it's hard to work with an independent band, you know, and to take a chance, because John, he's got an incredible reputation. I mean, let's go with it. I mean, he's working with Guar. I mean, you know, the guy's working with some high profile fucking bands. You know, and that's what led me to him. Obviously, I want my music to be in the same realm as these guys, of course. You know, but he took a shot with us, because you're taking a shot with an independent band. And the first thing he said to me, which is exactly what you said, he said, "You sure you don't want to shop this?" And I was like, "Oh shit," you know what I mean? I guess it's good. He signed off on it right away, and I was like, "Thank you so much, man." You know, no greater feeling in the world for a musician than to hear that. You know.
I felt the same way. I was like, you know, self-release, like what the hell? Like, like I'm sure labels would be willing to put this out there. But now you have it out there, people can listen to it, they can judge for themselves. But now you perhaps have a little bit of time to think about where you're going with the band. So my last question for you is, where do you see the future of the band?
Well, as of right now, especially after this conversation, I just got off the phone with Kaufman maybe like 2 hours ago. We're essentially business partners in Eye of the Destroyer, and everything we do, we talk about with each other. And, you know, we're on the same page here. I think it might be time for us to really shop and talk about where the next record's going to come out. I've already started writing songs. I got like 5 or 6 of them in the can that I'm pretty excited about. And I think it's time, you know, I think it's time for us to start shopping labels and seeing what's out there for us, and going with new music, because for me, I love to produce music. I mean, that's it. Like I will spend every available minute, second, and hour that I can with a guitar in my hands, with a notebook in my hands, on a drum set, trying to write more music. So I've got plenty of it coming, and it's just a matter of where we're gonna, what home we can find for ourselves to start putting it out. What makes the most sense for us? Obviously, there's no shows right now; otherwise, we'd be out touring on this record. But you know, you got to pivot. This is the world we live in, so that's what we're gonna do. And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna write some more songs, and we're gonna start to seriously shop labels, because I think it's time for us. I think after hearing guys like you review it so nicely and say things like, why isn't it on a label? Freeman looking at me like, what the fuck are you doing, idiot? Put it out on a label. You know what I'm saying? And I'm looking back at him like, I didn't know that was available to me. I'm sorry, bro. And so hearing that over and over again has definitely made me look at it differently, and that's definitely what our approach will be. But I'm kind of interested. I got a little bit of a concept of maybe releasing a song per month over the next 12 months, starting in January, over the course of the whole year, to maintain relevancy, to keep us fresh in the mind, and to personally challenge myself to get better as a songwriter and to produce more music and to continue to be creative in a time that really, has been hard for a lot of people. And I think it's an interesting concept, and I think people would be into it, and I think it would be, I think it's cool conceptually. So that's where we're at, and that's what the future holds for us as of right now. And if shows come back, you'll see us. I mean, right before this was over, I was in Europe. Right before COVID-19, I was in Europe playing with a band called Hate Diplomacy, and I would love to take Eye of the Destroyer to Europe. One of the coolest things that happened to me was I was on stage in England, and a guy came up to me and he goes, "You're Joe from Eye of the Destroyer?" And I was like, holy fucking shit. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? And he was like, "Oh man, I love the last record." I'm like, holy shit, this is crazy. That experience, like, how the fuck you get. I like when I get recognized at the diner that's around the corner from my house. Never mind getting recognized, overseas. That was just like an incredible experience for me. But it also was like, yo, wake the fuck up. Like, you're doing something here. People are liking it. You should approach a label. You should be touring, overseas with this band. You should try to push this band as far as you can push it.
I agree. Yeah, and I like the idea of one track a month, almost like a TV series, but instead of an episode every week, there's an episode every month. I think it's perhaps the future of music, because as we start to move more towards streaming services and that kind of stuff, the whole idea of a full-length album, unless it's a concept album, but even a concept album, you could really break it down with one song, like one part of the story, throughout a period of time.
Strangers did.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where the future is really going with music.
I agree, and I think that in a world where digitally, that's everything. Everything's digital, and in order to maintain relevance, you put out an album, right? Like, for instance, I'm putting out this record right now. It has, like, realistically, I mean, you know it better than anybody. It has a shelf life of relevance for about 2 months if I really promote it and I really try hard and I stay in everybody's ear about it. It really does, because, and it's no fault of anyone's. There's just so much good music coming out and bad music coming out that it just, a guy like you gets a stack of shit to listen to. It's just the way that it is. It's the nature of the beast. And so, in order to maintain relevancy, I feel like you have to consistently drop new music and keep giving people a reason to discuss your band.
I agree with you 100%, 100%. And I think next year is going to be even tougher, because a lot of bands held up their releases until 2021 because of COVID. So next year,
they're writing right now.
Yeah, and next year there's going to be this inflood of music where every Friday there's going to be 4 or 5 bands releasing an album, and it's going to be saturation. And it's just, I don't know if that's going to be the right idea, to be honest with you. But I agree with you. There's pretty much a 2 to 3 month shelf life, and then when you're not touring, that shelf life becomes even shorter, because there's no way for you to get the music out there, and you're not playing it, and all of these things are happening. It makes things really difficult. So the bands right now are caught between a rock and a hard place. It's like, if I release it now, I know that if I want to tour by the end of 2021, I need to put out something else, because nobody's going to remember an album that came out a year ago.
You're right. They might remember one song that they liked. You know what I'm saying? That's about it.
That's about it. And then if you wait for 2021 to release the album, people may not listen to it, because there's going to be so many other bands releasing albums at the same time.
That, but you haven't put out an album in 2 to 3 years, so the amount of relevancy that you possess at that point may be a little bit less. Not everybody's the fucking Deftones. You know what I mean? Everybody, you release an album every 3 years if you're a bigger band, but for a band like Eye of the Destroyer, you got to maintain relevancy, and it's important. It's imperative to maintain relevancy, especially in a world where you can't go out and tour. Especially. 100%. And for me, I like that, because I want to write as many songs as I possibly can, and I will be satisfied to release one song per month for an entire year. Sounds like fucking heaven to me.
I think it's a great idea, and I'm looking forward to it. Joe, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. This was an absolute pleasure and a blast to talk to you about the record. Once again, The Wolf You Feed, self-released by Eye of the Destroyer. Go pick it up. It's out right now. You're not going to regret it. This shit slaps hard.
Thank you. Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for your time. Your review is fantastic. And literally it was 7 minutes and 23 seconds of the best 7 minutes and 23 seconds of my life.
I don't hear that every day, at least not from my wife. Take care, man.
Your time, dude. I really do.